I'm going to go straight to the mission statement because Mike and Nick and Willity, I want your feedback. Since we had our district meetings and got some feedback about, some different approaches that we could take with the mission statement, been playing with some different thoughts, and the bullet points you see here were the immediate thoughts right after all of the meetings. And then I've got a new thought now that I've had a chance to kind of marinate on it. And so I'll show that in a second. But in the meantime, I've been asking people to give me some feedback, just some trusted advisors throughout our industry. And the two that are bolded are what people have seen to gravitate toward the most. And the biggest thing that I've really tried to focus on in this kind of, draft 2 is to keep it so simple. Right? Because the simplicity, something that we can really say in 1 or 2 sentences, I think keeps getting affirmed over and over and over and over again. And so whether we stay that route or not, we're not married to that, but I'm just curious kind of what really stands out to you guys as you look at this list.
Your 4th one down, except for I'm not crazy about the grow trust because it's like you don't have any. I say grow corn, grow leaders, grow markets.
Grow corn, go leaders, go markets. That's nice.
There's a trust part. Anytime we put trust in there, that immediately means to me, oh, you're lacking that, which we are, but I don't want to put it out to anybody.
Well, definitely, sustainability came up. So, that's got to be in there. And we already talked about that. And I think growing and developing markets is important too. I think to producers that would be one of the most important things.
Okay, how about, let's see, grow leaders, grow sustainably, sustainable corn and market. I don't know. I gotta think about this because that word is going to go away. That's a buzzword right now, and it's going to go away like every other buzzword.
Sustainability.
Yeah, I think that's it's a popular thing and popular word right now, and I think that will fade.
It will. It'll become something else. But while it's the hot word, we got to ride the wave.
Yeah. I went and revisited the aim point data that they shared with us in our June meeting. And it was really interesting to go back and look at it with a fresh set of eyes, and sustainability and the opportunities and consequences if we don't focus on it came through loud and clear. And I really thought deeply based on our 3rd district meeting that we had, because we had, I think, a really the deepest conversation about sustainability out of the 3 meetings. And so after, considering, is sustainability a buzzword? How long will it be around? Do we need to include it in our mission or not? That has been weighing heavily, and everything, all the signs are pointing to heck yes. And I think that the mission statement too, we have to remember, can be revised even every 5 to 10 years. And so a mission statement isn't meant to be in place forever. And so just as we're revising it now, like, from what it was before, we do it again. And so for 5 years, like Willity said, we could ride that wave knowing that that's the most important target now. And then in 5 years from now, we refocus and retarget on whatever the biggest opportunity.
Yeah, knock the cobwebs off and change a little.
So
I just want something that's short and easy to remember.
Yeah. Nick, as you ponder it, what stands out?
I do agree with Willity on the sustainability portion of it. And that is because we get to define it, and I think profitability and economics has to be a huge part of that. And I think exactly what we were just discussing right before this, of us putting on the corn marketing workshops, us getting Dr. Dahlstead back engaged to talk about ratios and the things that you need to look at, that goes to that sustainability mission. It's more than just hippy dippy, environmental stuff. It circles around to things that are actually important to our producers. So I think that really does need to be there. And we know that sustainability and an environmental focus has been a key driver of a lot of people for a long time, but it hasn't ever gotten traction like it has right now. If you look at corporate America, they are putting together sustainability statements and vowing to have sustainable supply chains and sustainable working. It's never had this much traction in corporate America ever before. I mean, even if you go back to when they really started doing flex fuels, Mike, it was all about energy independence. It wasn't about being sustainable. It wasn't about anything more than it's cheaper fuel and it gets us out of the Middle East because we're growing it right here at home. And so I think that this is getting some traction that we haven't had. And when it comes to, trust, I like the trust in there because what is NCGA doing right now? They are doing what they call the corn reputation campaign. They're trying to brand and build on the reputation and improve the reputation of corn. And what is that? Trust. At the very foundation, we're building trust with our consumers. We're building trust with people who will ultimately be the consumers of the product once it gets differentiated. So, to build trust with REI and VF Corp and North Face, to build trust with United and the car manufacturers, that we will be able to supply a sustainable feedstock for the ultimate product you buy. Because if you're buying ethanol made out of corn and that corn's not grown sustainably, then that ethanol is not sustainable. It's a supply chain.
I got tunnel vision, was thinking about the screwy position we're in right this minute with the organizations. That's what I was thinking on the trust. I got tunnel vision pigeonholed into that one. But you make a good point, that is, when we had our deal in Washington, D.C., and we got to talk to the consumer, that was the whole thing. They trust a farmer more than they trust anybody else in politics or any place else.
And if we want people to keep eating meat that's raised on pastures and in pens, we've got to be able, and pens. You can't just be in pastures, with grass fed, because we need to drive that demand for our guys. And so we have to develop trust in, corn fed beef. They're marketing globally, but is our affluence in this country going so far where it's breeding apathy? And they don't care. They just bite onto the buzzword. So I think that trust is important. And as you guys have said, markets, leaders, they're between 3 and 4, there's so much going on there and so few words. I like it short and sweet.
How would you put sustainability in number 4?
How about this? So what I'm hearing is good, and maybe this is a good marriage of them, maybe it isn't. But going back to how our 2 of our 4 priorities have the word trust in it, I think that again affirms even just the conversation we were just now having about how it's about trust with consumers, it's trust with the producers, with the supply chain, with all of our different audiences that we've identified. And so something simple like this, grow trust in the corn industry through demonstrating sustainability, knowing that sustainability is going to be defined by us, might work. And as I look at something like that, then you add some metrics. This says, well, what does trust really look like? Well, it says, well, it looks like producer trust. It looks like the trust with the first handlers. It looks like trust with the livestock industry, and that we're doing the right thing to support them. And so it gives us really something that we could get excited about, because the mission has to, feel like it's a reach. And when you look at, we could measure trust with the producer through our refund rate, right? But we could just flip it and say, if 100% of the producers, were letting us keep the money, that's, the highest trust that we could get. But we know we're at 12-ish% now. And so if we, increase that a lot, what would that tell us? Well, it tells us that, and we're doing good work. And so we could do something like that. We want to move from X% to Y%. And then we could do some benchmarking of, that produce or the first handler relationship, and say, how much, do we value this relationship? How well are we serving you? That kind of thing for both of the first handler and livestock. So, Mike, when you look at that, is that exciting? Is that nah? I'm really curious what you're.
Well, there's one thing that jumped right out at me that you're missing on here, and that's ethanol. We want the consumer trust that we're going to produce a good fuel, sustainable, perfect fuel for their vehicle.
Is that
And
something
that's a
that
big
we
part
can
of it.
do in Colorado? Because I think that that's definitely one of our audiences and one of our needs, like the ethanol conversation overall, we know is a huge one. But as we look at like what we can target, like is that something that we want to slice off too? Because we could add a fourth and say, you know, we want to really look at grow trust within our ethanol key stakeholders, you know, through, you know, some variety of
But I
things.
think we need
Add
to
that
make
for
sure that we got consumer in there somewhere, don't you? I mean, we got to build trust. The consumer is our most important person. They're going to consume the beef industry. They're going to consume our ethanol. They're going to consume it all. I mean, we got to make sure we're building trust with the consumer.
But we can't measure that as a
Or maybe
checkoff
not build it,
unless,
maintain it.
if so the
Improve it.
consumer audience is something that I think is important. And so I'm going to come to another slide really quick.
Okay.
Because we've got to figure out like, who do we really talk to as the corn checkoff? Because we know that the retailer definitely has to talk to the consumers, and they are the ones talking to the consumers. And also besides the retailer, like the Department of Ag through their Colorado Proud program, they're talking to consumers. And so like, who is the right person to be really
But Common
doing
Ground
that?
does a lot of great stuff too, though. They're directing. There's a lot of wives or women in the Common Ground that are in the supermarket. When somebody's picking up a vegetable or something, they're giving our story out, which is nationally, that is a fantastic program.
And it is, but is that the program that we want to invest in? Maybe, but that's through the partnership with NCGA, which we're doing, right? And so what our corn checkoff money needs to go to most, I think we could talk to consumers, but could it be better that we amplify the voices of our partners who are doing that? Or do we just become another one of those voices who's trying to get to them? Or
we partner up to leverage our dollars, but we do have a common ground here in Colorado. It's kind of taken a back seat, but we used to have a good common ground program that we, at some point in time, we need to really revitalize it again.
Right, and that might be something to put in our priorities. But that sequence, I want you to look at the sequence of these audiences. Because as we've been working internally with our comms contractor and just through some of the different meetings we've been having, we tried to look at these in tiers, like of who would be the priority, because we can't communicate with everybody all the time and have all of our programs hit all of these audiences all the time, because we just don't have the budget.
Teachers need to be moved under that Department of Ag.
Yeah,
the teacher part would be under that department, because the Department of Ag has that magazine they put out to all the kids that we sponsor, or that we have sponsored in the past anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Are you thinking the Colorado Ag Foundation, Mike?
No, Ag in the Classroom.
Mm-hmm.
That's Colorado Ag Foundation.
Oh, is it okay? Because we used to go. I don't know if we still give money to that or not. I didn't see it on there, but they used to come to us because we paid for almost all the printing for that stuff to go out to the kids. But that is a horribly expensive. But the kids like it, and some of them bring it home to mom and dad, and you get a little traction there. I mean, that's the next generation. You got to convince to trust us and use our product.
Right. And so as you look at all of these ones, the teachers and students are in that kind of bottom right hand or left hand corner. And so that's where we would, have the foundation kind of stuff. But
you're not just going straight up and down on this thing like livestock. It's going to be community. It's not necessarily under each one of these headlines.
No. So I go from left to right, from the top to the bottom. And so he said, out of all of the people that we talk to, the producers are the most important.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going up and down on them, and each one was a headline. Okay.
And then the next one, we know that we've got to keep the Department of Ag happy, and that we're, having an open pathway of information. And, even Nick and I were talking today, they have a call out right now for grants for some drought money, and we could, put a grant for drought money. And so there's just so much collaboration through them. So that's why they were high on the list. The third one, the first handlers, we know they've been a priority through all of our dialogues. Livestock industry was on the fourth. And that's where we had like the dialogue that we know that that's where most of the corn is going. So we have to go and make sure, knowing our limited resource, that they get some of it. Right. So the biofuel industry, you see, is, not as high on the list, but it's still on the list. But we wouldn't give them as much as we would the livestock industry, because it's not as big.
That's because they don't do anything to help us out. All they want us to do is make them money.
Well, I think as you look at opportunity wise, is there more opportunity in the livestock world or in the biofuel world? I think that
Livestock.
the jury is out. We haven't gotten a clear direction on that. I think we know that hammer down on livestock, but I'm not sure on the other.
Well, biofuels in every other state except for ours is, I mean, huge. Look at all the ethanol plants in Illinois, Iowa, the amount of ethanol they produce. Sadly, Colorado's lacking, and sadly, our ethanol plants in Colorado do nothing to help us promote. I mean, we're promoting stuff to help make them money. I think they kick a little bit back.
I wouldn't say nothing, Mike. I would say, we need to build that relationship with CAP. That needs to be built back up. But when we've called upon Front Range Energy or Front Range Ethanol, I can't remember which one it is.
And that's the one in Windsor, right?
That's the one in Windsor. They've been happy to help us. They've written op-eds for us. They've jumped in on a lot of our Blue Hose campaign. They've put a lot of time and effort towards what we're doing. It hasn't been money, but they're engaged with us. And so that's,
money always makes me happy.
Huh?
Money always makes me happy, though. That shows a little more commitment.
Money makes me happy as well.
There's that economist in you coming out, Mike.
But they jumped into some places, that were very valuable for us, where they've picked up a mantle and they've written some op-eds. Like, they've done some things that have helped us. So I wouldn't classify both of them in that direction. We do need to rebuild that relationship with CAP, and I think that we've got to really come at it from a perspective of, here's what we're doing to help you, rather than we are helping you, give us money. We have to build that partnership, and it might take a few years to get there. I mean, but if it takes that long, then it takes that long. But we're in it for the long haul. Like, this organization is bigger than any of us. It's bigger than all of us combined, and it has to be successful for the long haul. And building the relationships correctly might take a while, but if you do that, then they're built on a solid foundation and they can continue on. And if you hit a rough patch, you can work through it, because there's that built on trust and respect that you have for each other.
I like that. So now, laying these kind of categories out, or these audiences out like this, and then going back to the mission and saying, how would we measure trust, or what audiences would be the most important to measure trust around? We see producers. I don't think we have to really worry about the Department of Ag and measuring trust with them, because they'll tell us, they audit us, they do all of that. And so that's why they didn't have a measure. First handlers did, and then livestock. But we could widen the net a bit, but we just have to be careful, because we want to keep it simple. So
I think livestock producers, for the most part, I think they trust us that we're going to be able to supply. I mean, we've never run a short on corn for them.
And I don't think it's just the producers that we're talking about with the livestock industry. I think it's that supply chain, the
consumer that's buying livestock,
the yards, the JBSs, the whoever it is that we would want to influence corn.
Okay.
And Sarah, kind of looking at this, I know we have we have a huge relationship with the Department of Ag, but when it comes to prioritizing our work and who we're communicating with, could they be lower on the list? Because it's not
just oversee things.
They oversee us. We work with them. We have we invite them to our meetings, but they're there. It's a back and forth, rather than trying to build that relationship. That relationship's pretty solid, in my opinion.
I think it is too.
We know that they're a part of it.
Yeah. I wouldn't put it I definitely wouldn't last, but I don't.
There you go.
And those strategic partners, so now that one comes up to that top line, I think that there is a really big opportunity for us to look at the USMEF, grains, NCGA, that relationship, and how do we have that trust measured those in between, going both ways. And one of the things that you'll see here in a couple of slides is we could put a metric out that's really focused around how much we're doing collaboration with those guys. And so collaboration could look like the number of times that we're communicating in joint ways. And so are we collaborating with the Beef Council around sustainability communication messages, water that it takes to, produce a hamburger? We could measure that. We could look at strategic collaborations in communication, just with the financial pieces. Like we're going to work with, some of our farm financial groups and create some, communication events. And so anyway, communication is one big piece. And then the others are, and just getting our board members to sit on other boards. So just like you, Mike, and, we love the fact that you sit on this board and then you're also participating in, all of the NCGA work. That I think is a wonderful metric of, are we trusting each other and sharing resource and doing the synergy thing? So.
Well, I think it's important that our guys expand their scope other than just Colorado, because if you remember, I'm trying to remember, maybe 3 years ago, Oak Ridge, and we were involved with them through NCGA, and they gave us $50,000 towards our in kind for programming and stuff like that for our Blue Hose campaign.
Ooh.
At the time, it wasn't called Blue Hose, but it was for our ethanol campaign that we had.
They want to give us some more?
I wish they would, but at that time, it was never been done. I shouldn't say never been done, but it hadn't been done in anybody's recent memory. NCGA even gave us money for our ethanol, and that's just almost unheard of. They don't give money back.
Yeah. I just have to share these slides because I thought it was interesting as we think about those collaboration opportunities and how, the media is, always out there saying fun things. This was just on Twitter today, and it was about water, and it caught my attention because NASA and some kind of thing was trending, these pictures from space, and what are people from space seeing? And so I thought this was interesting because NASA is starting to publish on their social media streams that, hey, we don't have any water. We should be really concerned about water. And so there was that.
How deep do we get into that, though? I mean, we can't be everything to everybody. But I mean, this is a vital part of it. And I don't know that how deep we get into the water stuff in Colorado, other than the fact that we say we keep researching ways to use less, produce more and more with less and less.
Right. Well, and the big opportunity we heard is that we could help the livestock industry tell the story of what we do with water, because we are great stewards of it, because they just can't tell the story. And so then the next thing I wanted to share, I started to share a little bit of this in the 3rd district meeting, that I saw this thing on Netflix that was about describing things, this series where you could go and it's called Explained is the name. There's 3 seasons of it, and each episode has a different topic. And there's one about the future of meat and another one that's the world's water crisis. And so I watched both of them. They're short. And within those, of course, you're not going to be shocked. It's got the rhetoric that we know is saying that we use way too much water to do things, and that agriculture is the biggest culprit for all of this and our overconsumption of things like t-shirts. And so when they were sharing this info, it was just an affirmation of that. We've got to tell the better story about the hamburger. Right? We can't do that very well. We can't do it in Colorado. We can't do it nationally. And so we've got to do something here about this water story. And then just today too, I saw this on Instagram. And as we were, having this kind of wrestle of what do we talk about with sustainability? What do we talk about? What are the biggest priorities? I thought this was interesting because they're talking about conservation, often paired with sustainability. Right. But I loved on the right hand side, you could see some of the specific ways that they're looking at it. So if we're talking about conservation, it's about fuel, right? It's about this invasive species.
It ought to be all about combating the urban sprawl. That ought to be number 1.
Right.
That's what's going to hurt our sustainability when they keep taking our land and our water.
Right. And but the consumer doesn't want to hear that. They want to hear, I wish you would be just better, right? I want to live wherever I want to live, and
how much
carbon?
How much does this resonate outside of our ag bubble? Like
which part? All of it?
With the consumer? I mean, I think it sounds great. Like I'm loving this, but I'm not your typical audience.
I think that for the people who care about sustainability and who are really curious about environmentalism and that, they are like, this is it's about time.
Well, what about, Nick, weren't you the one that told me, I think you were the one that told me it took, what, 50 gallons of water to produce a microchip? Were you the one to tell me that, or?
A lot
Pardon?
more than that.
Okay.
Hold on, I
Maybe
think I
that
still
story
have-
ought to get out there. Everybody thinks we use a lot of water. Start thinking about all the microchips in the world and how much water that takes. That could take the focus off us a little bit.
If we do that though, that we just look like we're on the defense and that we've got.
No, I don't want to be on
something
defense,
behind.
but I just want to take the focus off us a little bit.
It's not going to help. They'll just say, and so, but what about you too? Because it's such a big deal, that narrative that bad corn industry isn't going to go away by deflection.
I know.
And so the thing that we talked about is, where does sustainability live within the priorities? Is it the top of the tip of the triangle, or is it number 2? Because once we have that sustainability through environment, economics, then we have people who trust us and we grow our markets. That's the natural progression.
Well, we moved that around last time, but you're kind of right. If you're sustainable, everything else falls into place. You can do all this stuff, but if you're not sustainable, you're just peeing on the wind, so to speak.
So looking at those priorities and some of the bullets on the screen here, we've the words that are bolded. Again, knowing that we could do a lot of things, these are the priorities. Again, my question was like, that's still a lot, but we've got 5 years.
But you know, one of the things I see as I don't want to say the problem, because I'm happy about it and I'm sad about it, is that the younger generation from my generation, I was so busy making a living when I was young, I didn't live. And now, thank God, you got the younger generation that's very involved in all their children's sports. They go to everything. I mean, I'm ashamed to say, my oldest son, I missed so much of his stuff because I was so damn busy between the fire department, farming, all the stuff I was doing. I missed so much. Thank God when my next one was born 15 years later, that much difference between them. When he was in football at Skyline High School, my station is up the road, and I had ex-NFL players. We went to every practice and parked up on top of the hill and watched every practice. So we were much, I mean, that was a village of raising second son.
Wow.
But that's, I see, I don't know how you get younger people involved in that, because they want to take their kids to soccer games, football games. They want to be totally involved in everything. And so they're saying family or work. And I always say God, family, work.
I
So
think, Mike,
how do you, I don't know.
I think the biggest thing that you can do is you can outline the commitment that they'll need to make. You need to basically be able to say, here's your, if you join as a board member, here's your bottom line. It's going to be four in-person meetings a year and 1 virtual to elect officers. And those meetings are all day. You could come in early and leave early. Huh?
Because there's all the involvement that should be involved in between those meetings.
So
if that's the case, I need to jump off.
the frequency of meetings, all of that will have an impact. I think more so than that, it's what are we doing?
And
And
I'm
what's
just
our
saying,
structure, right?
and I'm just saying, you just need an outline of like, here's your time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that,
Bare
they have-
minimum.
I'm just kind
Absolutely.
of throwing it out there of what we do now, but you need to have it as a time commitment, and you need to also say, okay, if you don't want to be involved at a board level, you can also get involved on an action team or a task force. And we're going to have a start time, which is going to be late November. We're going to meet 6 times, twice in person, 4 virtually. And then your end date is May 1st. We're going to do it all before then, so you don't have to worry about planting.
And you know, I'd like to see done, Nick, maybe it's kind of like NCJ. Our action teams doesn't need to be our board members. We need to go out there and get other people involved in our action, in the market development, and all of our different action teams.
Yep.
All right, so let's talk
And
about
your
that.
board members is just strictly the liaison between the board and that action team, and that action team that chair. If we mold it more like that, I think we can get more people involved in it.
So take a look at this flow chart here, because I think you're absolutely right. The action team and committees are not the same people that are on the board. Sometimes maybe that might be the case, but maybe not. But if you look at this kind of a flow, the action teams and committees is where we want to get some feedback, because we know that we need to do some restructuring there. And so we know the executive committee is necessary. We know that market development continues to be a need to have a committee where we're working on strategies that drive that. We know research continues to be a big piece. I mean, those two are obviously in the market order. But then outside of that, we know the regulatory affairs is something that has to be addressed because that focus could be shifted to maybe industry issues or maybe not. Maybe industry issues is something that actually lives through all of the committees, knowing that market development has a kind of a sidebar that says there's issues that we talk about here. Research has an issues component too. And then the sustainability committee also has an issues component or something to that effect. And so maybe we add a new committee that is all about sustainability if that's going to be one of our biggest focuses.
But I think you move
when look at
executive
that-
committee up right underneath the board.
Say that again.
If you're building this chain, the executive committee ought to be right underneath the board, because the board's going to tell them that they're going to. That way, the executive director only answers to one group instead of the whole board. I mean, that's obviously that should be working, but and then our action teams, we have a chairman, and the board guys can be liaisons between the board and whatever action team they're interested in doing. Or actually, they would appoint that. I mean, that's how it works at NCGA, and it seems to work very well. And you've witnessed it.
Let's see. Am I doing this? Sometimes it'll take me a second to get it. So you think that the executive committee needs to come out of the board?
Yes,
That's easy.
because the board elects the executive committee.
No, and if we are going down that road of getting more people not on the board involved in action teams, that is the one committee or action team or whatever you want to call it has to come from the board because that's your officers. So that is the one.
Say that again, Nick.
It is the one that has to come from the board. You can't invite non-board members or not, you can't make that committee up of other volunteers outside of the board like you can all the others. That one has to be kind of a notch of the CCA board.
You're talking about the executive committee, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah, of course. Okay, I thought you were talking about all the other action teams, but I understand. Well, this one's not bad either. Get rid of the executive board, huh?
So hold on. Let me see.
Hopefully we won't need a.
I'm sure that some people think we have to do that.
Okay. So is that more what you were thinking?
Where's the executive board at? Well, the executive committee should be right directly underneath the board because they work for the board, and then the executive director, and then from there, under the executive director comes basically everything else, all the action teams. Because what is it? The rule of 7. Technically, you can supervise seven people. So if you had the 7 chairmen or however many action teams we have. There you go. Just
Okay, I'm going to play with this. Hold that thought. What do you think about a structure like this? Where
like what?
we then look at the structure of the board and we reduce it. Because we could play with all the different types of board arrangements.
We can get rid of all the districts.
So we do a 4 board structure, or a 9 board seat structure, where in that there's 4 districts, northeast, southwest, 1, 2, 3, 4, something really simple so that we know that we get all of the regions of the state represented, but that it's not so segmented like we have now where it's hard to find people. Then we've got 3 at-large seats, and then we still maintain 2 seats from the largest producing counties so that we still feel like we've got good representation where we're growing the most corn.
Who's the second largest county producer? Is it Weld?
It was Yuma and who's the one? What was the other one? Was it Kit Carson, I thought?
I didn't think
I have to
that
go
much.
back through the records.
Now see who produces what. But yeah, that's fine. So you're looking at now, you're back up to 9. You're back up to 9 board members again, though, right?
Right. And so that
How many
takes
do we have
us to
right
9.
now? One.
We've got 20? Well, 10 and 10 with the alternate. And so then going on, we eliminate all the alternate seats. And then we replace that with the mentor program. And then if we decide that, and the mentor program would be for the leadership development, right? So that we have a strong pipeline of leaders that would then join the board when we have terms out. And then if we needed some kind of a steering committee or an advisory board for some special need, like if we wanted to have a water advisory board that's going to help us with something, or who knows what, a leadership development advisory board or some other kind of a committee, we could, but that is only going to be a standing committee for as long as we need it. And then it goes away.
A 2-year board term, do we, I'm torn between term limits and having them. I mean, I don't want to become a good old boy organization. That's where term limits are great. But on the other hand, and if we had people knocking our door down, definitely have the term limits, because we can't get anybody to be on the board. Term limits can also hurt us. So that's kind of, that's just, we're in a catch-22 there right now, I think.
And then we would add in a layered or a laddered executive committee progression, whereas, the people who will be on the executive committee move from, second vice president, first vice president to chair, something like that. So we know that there is that longevity and just experience knowing how to lead.
And see, and you're right, exactly. NCGA has first vice president, president, chairman. That's the executive board. The treasurer is not part of that executive board. It's 3 people.
So this, I think that we, again, could look at
Mike?
the structure a lot of different ways. This is, based on a lot of research and ways that boards work and things that we've seen, just norms across the industry. And so Nick, as you look at this, how does this work in your vision?
It's very similar to kind of what I was thinking. And I was thinking maybe, instead of 4 districts, let's just put it down to 3. And do a western slope, northeast corner, southeast corner. Because if you really think
there's nothing in the northwest corner of Colorado for corn. That's all.
Yeah, there's nothing up here.
Don't even need a 4.
Yeah. No, there's absolutely, there is no, I don't think there's a single stalk of corn grown up there. I really don't. I think it's sagebrush, it's cattle country.
There's some wheat. There's some wheat, but there's just no
wheat.
corn.
You're right, but no, I don't think there's any corn.
So tell me the regions again, Nick, so I can.
I was thinking like maybe, you've got this east, I would say divided along the
Continental divide.
So you'd have the western slope, and you'd have the northeast, and I'd probably say you would include, let's see, is Park County. So I'd say you go Park County, slide it along Douglas up to Arapahoe, and then just go straight east, divide it between Arapahoe and Elbert, Washington and Lincoln and Yuma and Kit Carson, and just draw that. And then
the northeast is going to be the most powerful district. That's where the most corn will be grown.
Which one?
The northeast.
And that's
if
why
you're putting Kit Carson and Yuma and all those in that northeast. That's
no. Kit Carson's in the south.
Oh, okay.
So the dividing line would basically be like right along the Arapahoe, Washington, Yuma line.
Okay.
And then you would have you'd need 1 representative from each district or region. Like we could get rid of districts and just call them regions.
Yeah, region.
And 1 district, a minimum of 1 director per district or region. And then everything else, it's pretty much all at large, but you've got to make sure you have at least 1 from each region. And then you could go up to 10, you could do 9, you could, and ultimately, I hope the goal would be, Mike, is to eliminate alternates.
Yeah, there's no need for them. Like a healthy board doesn't need like a whole bunch of other people just sitting there doing an alternate role. Like there's just no purpose for it. From leadership development, it was the only thing that we've heard that is the only reason.
I think that comes with, and then to bring that leadership element to keep some people involved like yourself, Mike, that are like on an NCGA board or on an advisory team or whatever, or an action team at US Grains or NCGA or USMEF, you have ex officio positions on the board that don't vote. You know,
Right.
there's still,
advisory board members for those types of things, or I would want Mike running the market development committee, right? And then being that person that then represents, this committee in the board meetings. And
I don't know that I
speaking
would
as
want
that
to,
liaison.
that I would need to run it. I think you find, if we can find the right people, let's say you got 5 people that say they want to be on the market, develop, the executive director appoints the chairman, and maybe Mike or Troy or who knows is a liaison between that action team and the board. That's how it works at NCGA.
Yep.
That way you got your board members involved in each one of those deals as a liaison and as an advisor to them.
Mhm.
But can you find enough people to fill with action teams? That could be, and maybe the regulatory one has to be a board member that likes that stuff. I don't know. That doesn't float my boat, so I don't care.
Well, it goes away. So it doesn't matter. It's really who wants to get involved in markets, who wants to do research, who wants to do sustainability. Beyond that, everything else is about communication.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so the market development committee gets to go and work on, let me find this beautiful screen. Market development gets to work on all of the market development things. And so that committee would work on feed and biofuel market stakeholders. That committee would be the ones that gets to build the relationships with USMEF and Grains and NCGA and look for those collaborations, look for the ways to leverage their documents. Like, I was so excited when we had USMEF sharing that beautiful data about corn, in Colorado and the economic impact at export markets. I'm like,
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
yes, yes. So, I mean,
But
I
they
can
act
see that
41
committee going.
cents
Go ahead.
And the thing is, we got the regional office in Denver. We're one of the lucky states.
Right. So each of these committees would be in then direct alignment with whatever that priority was from the strategic plan. And that's all they do. That's the only thing they do, because if they did anything else, then they would be going outside of the scope of what this organization's really supposed to be doing. Right. So if there is the research committee, they've got these really clear lines that, well, the research has to touch, these areas: sustainability, supply chain things, market development things. Makes it really easy.
And Nick, I know you want to be over the stock show, but it would be another great spot would be down with the Meat Federation and with the World Trade Office there in Denver.
There you go.
Just as a backup plan, because they got some empty offices in there too.
I know NCBA's
That
got
way-
space in their building. You can go down to Lone Tree. Then you wouldn't have to drive very far, Nick. No, there's all sorts of opportunity there. I wanted to circle back. To where we kind of started, because we started with the who, all of our different audiences, and then the whys, and these whys have really touched our mission. And the number 3 why that we've uncovered is kind of related to trust, where we began our conversation today, but the corn production things that they don't trust and how that links to sustainability. I'm curious, is there anything else besides?
Do you think it's the consumer though, for why does CCA? I think CCA, we need to convince the producer of what we do. We had an opportunity when corn really got high. We should have pat ourselves on the back and put that out there. Here's what your association's doing. Corn is at its highest right now because of trade, because of this, because of the work that your organization's been doing throughout the years to get us there.
And that's why that producer audience is number 1, always, just to that point.
Yeah.
Like, always they're coming back to them for all that. Sometimes we're talking research, sometimes we're talking about sustainability, sometimes we're talking about leadership, but it's always they're the ones we're talking to.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But the corn production and corn sustainability, and number 4, that that assessment that people just don't think that we should be growing as much corn as we do to feed animals, because we could be doing something else with it.
Well, they keep thinking they're the same people that think we're substituting fuel for food.
Right. Right? But are there any other pieces or priorities that we need to be focusing on that circles back here? So like thinking about, how do we talk to the consumers through, the people, the retailers, and, supporting our supply chain and supporting, all of those that are experts at it. Is there anything else that has to fall in there? Any topics?
Part of our story, especially for this water, most people have no idea what LIPA, the systems on our sprinklers, are, the low energy precision application that we put on our sprinklers. We spend that's a pretty good size extra cost. Instead of sprinkling that water like it used to be, clear up an area where it's evaporating, it's going right down to the bottom of the stock and in the shade all summer long. So that LIPA system, it's an expensive deal to put on, but that's something that we're doing to save our resource. So we're getting more corn with less water.
What's that acronym? Like LIPA, is it LEAPA?
Yeah, that's what is it? The low energy precision application.
Yeah, low end. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So tomorrow we're meeting with Colorado Proud to talk about how do we leverage some of their communication channels and get our corn producers as a part of their sustainability storytelling process.
Sure.
And how we're managing water. This is like maybe a beautiful example that we lead in with. Right here, let's talk about, have Mike on the camera talking about, here's what LIPA is. Did you even know that we have something?
Mike's a dryland farmer. You better get somebody who knows more about it. But
okay,
yeah, I mean, it's true. And the other thing that we're doing now, all of our sprinklers are controlled off your telephone from anywhere, so we're not wasting that water. We used to have 1,500 gallon a minute wells for 160 acre, for 120 acre circle, a quarter section of land, but irrigates 120 acres. Now we only need 300 gallon a minute wells to do the same thing.
I love that. Here's the story of technology, and here's how we're using our phones and the apps that you'll find on our iPhones. We have one in our pockets too, and here's what the technology looks like. I think that's
and our precision for fertilizer. I mean, all this stuff, the technology, we don't overlap but an inch per mile. So the amount of chemicals we're saving by not putting on the ground, the amount of fertilizer we're not using on the ground, we're doing it right in the furrow. I mean, we're just doing so many things to cut everything. And you look at how corn was grown even 15 years ago compared to today, we're probably using, what would you guess, Nick, 50% of the fertilizer we used to use, 50% of the chemicals, the GMOs. When people say GMOs are bad, the first thing I say to them, I said, remember people complain about the airplanes flying over and spraying those chemicals? Because of the GMO corns, you don't see I mean, sadly, we put a lot of those out of business, but you don't see the aerial sprayers like you used to see. Because we don't have to do that anymore.
I don't know what that is, but I'm sure there's that metric out there, Mike. And it's not small.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think those are wonderful examples.
Now we would have to find the exact deal because you don't want to lie to have them look it up and find out we were wrong. That would kill our trust. But if we can find out the right numbers, it is significant.
Well, I think you have identified some key topics that will go and get those details. Fertilizer, the water, the
our pesticides, our herbicides,
and pesticides, the technology.
Yeah. Well, like the moisture monitors that you stick in your field, and they tell you
exactly
what the capacity is, so you can, with incredible accuracy, know what you should and when you should be watering.
We watch our profiles now. We never did that before. We didn't worry about it. But now profiles are a very important part of raising corn.
See, I think that would be the funnest story to tell. Let's do that. Talk about those water profiles.
We take it for granted. That's the problem.
They're so simple, but they're so fascinating. That behind the scenes aspect, consumers are going to love that. And so to know that we've got a partner that can help us.
It's so common though for us. We just take for granted everybody knows without telling our story. You're right. We should be we need to be out there beating our drum, telling our story.
Right, because they think that we're just, dumping everything out at willy-nilly, and that we don't. Somebody in that water one that I was telling you about from Netflix, they said that all farmers have to do is just dump the seed out, and water is free, and so is the sun. And the fact that there was even just that assessment that water's free was interesting. Like just that simple assessment. Well,
look what they're doing with water. A lot of these cities, Longmont is one of them. You can know, it used to be, you could do whatever you want with your rainwater. Now they got it on your gutters. If you want to capture that water in a barrel, they're saying no because it needs to go down the street, the sewer system, back in the river system, the ecosystem. Now they're monitoring if you can catch your own rainwater because they think they control our rainwater. It's just, to me, it's getting ridiculous.
Okay, I want you to look at the screen because as we are going to move to setting some tactics that will roll up under our priorities, we've got to put some timelines with them. And when I think of timelines, I think of immediate, mid-range, and long range. And the immediate is a year or less.
Brand name is number one. We got to get that.
that?
That's the first thing we got to do. It really is, because that way we don't get confused with anybody else.
Right. Well, and it refreshes us for the next generation. It says who we are now. It does all of those things that we know we need to do for all of the reasons. And so we take care of that.
Do we have sample names that we're looking at?
I think right now the biggest leader is Colorado Corn Council, but we haven't really done a formal assessment of what the name should be. So that would be the first part of that strategic plan.
You would put like the marketing council in there or something like that, because that is what we do.
Who knows? It could look a lot of different ways, but I think like the first, we could say by, February 1, we want to have that figured out. And in that, we would also have our structure figured out, where we're going to remap the regions. We're going to look at the board, alternate seats, all of those things. We could say that's going to be done in 6 months. And then
the second priority is that redistricting. So I don't know what's involved in that. If we can just say, yep, we're going to do it. If we got to go back to the producers to vote on that, or if the commission can just bring a proposal, they can say, give me the blessing. I'm not sure how that works.
Well, the good news is Nick does, and it's really easy for us, it sounds, and we've already been doing a lot of the legwork through our district meetings and through even, having the opportunity for producers to engage today, even though they chose not to. The simple fact that we gave them the opportunity to give us feedback will make the department very happy. And so we'll make a recommendation as to exactly how we want it, and then they will approve it.
Okay, so my next question to all of you is, how are you gonna, with no alternates, how are we going to be sure that, I mean, look at even tonight, what a simple thing to get on the damn computer and nobody's on. Not a single board member is on. That just disgusts me. How are we going to make sure that if we got seven directors, how are you going to make sure they show up?
It's a changing culture. And
well, it's going to have to be.
Organizations that have it, why can't we?
Yep.
But you're right. I mean, nobody misses the NCGA meeting. It just doesn't happen.
It doesn't.
And nobody misses Colorado Farm Bureau or Colorado Cattlemen's or Colorado Livestock.
And people want to get on those boards. They want to be on there. You guys probably have a wait list with the Farm Bureau. I don't know. It was tough to get on a board with the Farm Bureau, isn't it, Nick? Right. I don't know.
It's competitive. They've got people running against each other every year.
Yeah.
Same. Now we just were told this morning we got 144 applications for our action team for NCGA, and we're going to pick out 90 of them.
Yes, and you know why? Because they are clear in what they do. They do what they say they're going to do. They don't mess around with all of
prestigious to get on that board because they got a great reputation.
And bingo, it's all about that. And so our immediate goals is all about reputation. We've got to say, here's who we are today and why you need to come and play, because we have all the priorities right. We have a strong reputation with all of the supply chain, all of those things. So we do the reorg. Then we create a communication strategy. One of the things that we've uncovered right now is that we don't have good lists for all of the different audiences that we know we need. And we've got lists, but they have to get better, right? We need to have good lists for our producers, not just email, but mailing address. We need to have good lists for our first handlers, for our feed yards, all the things. And so in the next 6 months, we do that. And then we start figuring out how do we measure trust through how we
I'm going to give you another one. Nick, maybe you can answer this. Is there, I don't know what's involved to change if you got to change a market order, exactly what you got to do, but I've always had a problem when these older guys finally retire. I'm going to use Leo Weber as a perfect example. Guy was extremely involved. He was more involved than I ever was. And he decides to retire and rent his farm out. Now he's still very interested because he wants his farmer to make money, so they'll continue to pay his land rent. But we put him out to pasture. Now the guy's got the ambition for it, the time, the passion, and we put them out to pasture. I wish there's a way we can utilize that. Maybe that's where we get them back on these action teams, maybe.
Right.
Maybe that's where we use them.
And the
if we can't change if we can't change the marketing order, let them be on the board, maybe we go back and grab them and put them back on these action teams somehow.
Honestly, Mike,
Is there
There's
a
a lot of good
requirement?
people.
1 acre of corn.
Yeah, so the requirement to
One bushel.
participate on a committee and an action team, is it any different than if it would be a board member?
I wouldn't think so, but you know, the market, all you gotta do is it doesn't tell you how much you gotta market for corn, so you can market 1 bushel. There is no limit.
So we really could qualify just about anybody.
I'll give them the damn bushel of corn and sell it in their name. I don't care. I mean, and they can figure out how they're gonna give Colorado corn 1/10 of a penny.
Cool. So the second or the third and fourth bullets are really speaking to that attraction of good leaders. So if we create an event and education strategy for producers, so we have good events that give them value. If we have an education strategy where we're, offering them the opportunity to learn about things they want to learn about, then they're going to want to hang out with us more, right? They're going to want to participate in leadership. And we know that we have to help them because of the trends around consolidation and debt and the needs to build for the future and the sustainability, all of those things. And so if we could really, over the next year, assess how we have good events and how we give producers the events that they want, I think we would be winning.
You know
And
how
then-
else we can bring people in on this is, and I don't know that how you do it because there's competition between implement dealers, but the technology, good Lord, I can't keep up with it. When I get on that combine once a year and try to remember all the crap that you got 3 computer screens to try and learn, maybe we get these guys come say, hey, we're going to hold a technology class that's going to show you how to use your iPad, your whatever, whether you're running John Deere International, maybe you just do the couple big ones, but I think a technology one to show them how to run what's in the machine they have right now, because when you only run that combine once a year or twice a year for a week, and that stuff, it takes a while to get back into it again.
I love that. Well, and
So
you
we
think of
partner
even
with
just the
implement
social
dealers?
sustainability aspects of that. Like when I have a well-trained staff, when I have well-trained people who are using the machines and the equipment that I have, then I know that I'm going to be more efficient. I'm going to have less safety issues, all of those things. And so that all rolls up into sustainability at the end of the day.
What were you saying, Nick?
Could we not partner with implement dealers in like before harvest rolls around, at least corn harvest for sure,
Yeah.
and have a seminar in the dealership where we serve them food, teach them how to run the computers, how to set the machine, just as a reminder, like, hey, come here, we'll feed you, learn how to set the machine and work with
John
it
Deere
throughout
that every spring for planting. They'd bring everybody in the spring to show what their new planters look like, the new technology. They don't, unfortunately, like over here anyway, on the Front Range, I haven't, since those other guys bought it, there hasn't been that, but maybe we partner with them and provide the food for that, for maybe one up in Greeley, maybe one in Yuma or stuff like that with the John Deere dealer, and then with the international dealers, so we can cover all the different, a couple of different kinds of the 2 most popular planters.
Well, if we had 3 regions, we could do, one in each region annually and say that's one of our metrics of success is that we do some kind of really nice education in each region every year.
I think you got to do more than that, though. I think Nick hit it on the nail head. I think you do it corn harvest, corn planting, maybe, I don't know about fertilizer because that's a different, most people have a spray, but probably corn harvest, maybe silage harvest and combine. Maybe,
I like it. The more the better.
As soon as we
Thing
get
is, the more we
6.7
can get
cents
out.
per ton on a silage ton, yes, we'll talk about silage.
Yep.
Yes,
And your
yes.
dry matter, why it matters.
Yes. So we look at events and education. Then the next piece is we build our leadership competency matrix. We know exactly what we are looking for when our leaders, and we look at leaders in the executive, board, committees, and action teams, because, they'll have some universal competencies, but we can see, how they ladder up too. And while I'm thinking about it, I do have a competency slide I want to share. Where did I put that?
And Mike, back to the name, I remember you saying something about that. Just like the thought was to keep it short, sweet, kind of like our mission statement. And the nice thing about just saying Colorado Corn Council is there is a definite correlation with the Beef Council, the Colorado Beef Council. Everybody knows that that's a checkoff. They know that it's, well run and respected, and it just kind of feeds off of that synergy in the name. And I think as we work, we're already looking at doing another family features article with the Beef Council or in CBA and that's a way that we can help promote each other, work with each other, and feed off of each other. And that's exactly what we need to do, is leverage each other's expertise and our the idea is sustainability for this one, and basically from farm to fork, that you can get. So what happened? Okay, we're back. But that was my idea behind just keeping it as Colorado Corn Council. Don't define marketing, because do you want to call it the Colorado Corn Marketing and Research, or marketing and sustainability?
No, the council's fine by me.
Yeah, that was just my thought, is let's keep it short and sweet and to the point.
C cubed. So what you see here are the leadership competencies that we heard from Aimpoint and through all of our dialogues that are most important, and that we could start building our matrix around. And once we have this core matrix, then we know that then we can start to build our mentor programs around these. We can build our self-assessments for our board members around these. We can then, open it up and train our producers on these things. And so this is obviously just a draft, and I'm curious, what would you add or what would you modify? Anything immediately stand out?
Business IQ would really be a great one. I like people that can make a decision instead of kicking it down the road all the time too.
Mm-hmm. That decision-making column was hopefully to describe some of those, but I love just thinking like the timeliness. So when you think of decision-making, what are then the pieces of that? Well, that I can do it in the right time, that I can do it in the right way, but the timeliness.
Well, that's important to me. I get tired of this thing. We'll talk about it next meeting. Well, next meeting's 3 months away. Let's get it put to bed right now so we can move on to something bigger and better each time.
Yeah, Mike or Sarah, the only thing I would say is knowing their role. So, know what you're supposed to do as a board member, know what you're supposed to do on your farm, know what you're supposed to do in your community, know your role in what you play and where you're at.
I think probably the business IQ can go further down, because you're right. I mean, they need to know the role. Once they get into that, I think open-mindedness, know your role, be open-minded. There's some things we got to do that financial health and banking is very, very important, whether it's for the council or whether it's for your individual farms. I mean, every one of these things to me right here brings value to the producer. Every single one of them you got down here.
Well, we could even, so going back to the education and events, saying, that we want to have multiple events throughout the year, we could pick each one of these competencies and build an event about each one. Right? Say, January is going to be the first one, February's open-mindedness, March is business IQ. Like we could just have events about these things. Or just, a sub focus of whatever event we do, we always maybe pull in a competency no matter what it is. So I'm going to go right back to the when priorities get done again. So we build a competency, and then we have a plan of how we develop our leaders. Then we define sustainability, because if we can't define it, then we really can't measure it. We can't build programs or research to support it. And so we look at sustainability through the corn eyes in Colorado, using the NCGA kind of definitions as our guide.
But I'll have these guys tell me when I tell them that's the big, how the hell do you think I've been in business 50 years so I'm not sustainable? Yeah. We want to make sure you're going to be there for the next 50 years too, your kids or whoever.
Ooh, and you know what we have to do? We have to remind them, and when I guess more importantly, we have to train them on what Aimpoint told us. And that was about I put this in here somewhere, about the enterprising builders and about the financial elites, and that they're in 45% consolidation is expected in the next 20 years. And so whether they like it or not, like if they want to be in business, they need to know this. Like we've got to train them that this isn't something that's just it might happen, like all the data saying it's going to happen. Do you want to continue to stay in business? We'll help you.
You know what else? When something hits my mind, if I don't spit it out, I forget it. But another thing, like at the farm show or something, when you were talking about sustainability, that brought to me secession. Give them a few, maybe a 1 hour deal, just the things you got to think about when you're thinking about succession for your farm. There's a lot of people that talk about it, but they don't know where to start.
Right. Well, and that's right. It falls right in line with sustainability, right? Succession planning is a part of the economics. It's a part of the social fabric of that community and the families. And so I think that succession and sustainability are hand in hand.
And there's a lawyer that always advertises in the fence post. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she does mostly farm and ranch stuff. I bet we could talk her into coming and doing a 1 hour seminar or some of the, just don't get down the weeds, just give some of the things you need to start considering.
There's a lot of really great speakers on succession planning that we could tap into. We could have, there's a whole bunch of them. And a lot of even the like farm credit might offer that for free because they've got some experts in that area I've known in the past.
As long as the growers don't think that we're tapping into their deal, you know.
They could. And so tell me more about that, Mike. What's the line?
Well, I'm being facetious about it because of the growers right now with the farm credit deal out there in Burlington or whatever the hell it is they got.
The one that they said they have that they haven't done squat to do.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so how do we best serve the corn producers? I think we do need to help them to see that, you know, it doesn't matter if you've been around for 5 generations up to this point, like the world is changing.
Well, I think we help them build strong business through the education pieces that we just talked about throughout the year, whether it's helping them with their planner, helping them with technology, whatever that may be, helping them with succession. Maybe we help them with a little bit of financial ratios and stuff. And those are the things I think we help them build strong business to be sustainable. I mean, to me, there's 2 types of sustainability. One that the consumer looks at and one that the producer looks at.
Mm-hmm. And we have to define both sides, and that'll be
yes.
I think, a big thing. And I think it will take us about a year to do. Like if we started it immediately, like to get to a point where everybody loves the definition will take that long. And that's just through the experience of other organizations that have had to do the same thing.
The key is know who our audience is at that day.
Exactly. So we define it and then we create our research. We get really good and we build our RFP criteria, our reporting criteria, all of the new ways that we're going to look at how we do how we do research. And again, making sure that it's really tied to sustainability. And so that the research committee, you know, would be working with them over the next year to figure out our plan. Their ties to CSU, other places, whatever.
And once we get down the road, I mean, this first year is going to be extremely busy with all the stuff we got up there, but it needs to be done. But once we get this ball rolling and get this thing done, this is all going to all fall in place every time for us.
So you think that we're on the right track?
Yes, I do.
Cool.
I think it's a great plan. I mean, I don't have the smarts to think of all the stuff to just put up here, but it's very good.
So mid-range and long range are just a little bit wider, right? So I think that first bullet under mid-range, I'm not in love with 5 for the number. And so that says 5 sustainability focused communication collaborations per year. It might be 2, it might be 10. I think we get to kind of look at that in terms of resource. And maybe
I think the 3 to 5 years is fine because if we got 2-year term limits or whatever that board sees, maybe one. So if you do it 2 years, you're going to have more that you can run for, you can be in that spot for 1 term, 2 terms. There's 2 terms. 5 years is plenty long for the long range.
Right. That's true. I like that. So we measure some kind of collaborations with our people like USMEF, NCGA, our livestock partners, and so forth. We start setting some really good engagement numbers on how we're communicating, since we'll have really good good groups with our community, with all of our audiences. So we can say, okay, how many people are opening and engaging and calling and coming to the meetings, and we can really start looking at that engagement. And key opinion leaders is something that Robin and I talked about last week. We can identify and report on who our key opinion leaders are. And that's just to what you were saying, Mike, like we have to know the audience that we're talking to. And so we can have different, key opinion leaders depending on the audience.
You know, there's another arm to this thing, and it just depends on what's going to happen after the 8th, I think, more than anything else. But if that other side goes away, we need to build a membership arm in here for membership for this thing, I think.
We can't
If
put
that
this
goes
in our
away, if it
strategic
stays with
plan.
us, we still have to build a membership deal.
We can't put this in the strategic plan because that's not covered in the market order.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so if
We
that
gotta-
could
we gotta-
happen by a group of producers that want it to happen, but it wouldn't be a part of our plan.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to focus on what we're responsible for focusing on.
And then if that happens, we'll just make sure that their plan says that they have to engage with our plan.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Sustainability metrics, I think, are that 1 to 3 year bucket, right? So once we define sustainability, then we start saying, okay, let's look at what we are going to report on. Do we want to report on water, soil, social, whatever? We get to decide. And so we put some of those out. And then I think we start looking at all of our leadership positions are filled. So all of our board positions are filled. All of our committees have people that are on them. We have 0 open spots. And then the 3 to 5 year longer term goal is that they actually show up, that they're highly engaged. And
Well,
so
I hope they're highly
as
engaged
we-
before 3 to 5 years.
right. So, 3 years out, we don't have this problem, right? We're not having the same conversation where only half of our board showed up for a call. We know that 3 years out, 90% of our people always show up and that they're highly engaged. And in that, we get to define what highly engaged looks like, right? It means that they give X hours a month. It means that they never miss this or whatever. We'll define that. And so I put 90% in there because I don't think that 100% is achievable. I think that we're people and the, boards are boards are boards, and we're always going to have that one that doesn't show up. And so I want to win. And so we could go maybe 95, but not 100. And then the other things too, we look at the board members, serving on other boards. Maybe we set a goal, half of our board members have to show up in some other leadership capacity. And it doesn't have to just be ag organizations,
Exactly.
it could be community, like anything really.
I can take my
And those
spot on the bank
trusts.
board. I don't care.
Right.
They put me out of a lot of stuff.
Yep.
And then the 3 to 5 year, we look at those trust metrics. And so again, the refund rate and the things that we were looking at before, producer trust is high, first handler trust is high, all of that. So I did a lot of talking there and I want to get your feedback now.
I think you covered it. I was going to say everything you just said. How's that?
Well, if it feels good, that's affirmation, Mike. And so I'm happy, but I don't want to, don't just accept it because I talked a long time.
The collaboration part needs, I think that can be that word collaboration. Maybe I haven't read everything, but that can almost be in every immediate, mid-range, and long range. Because that's going to be part of our partnering with NCGA, Grains, Meat Federation, Colorado Livestock. What do they call them? Colorado Livestock or Beef Council? What is it, Nick? I don't even know what.
They're both.
There's
Two
two
separate organizations.
Yep.
Yeah, Colorado Livestock is basically your feeders, your cattle feeders, your hog.
And they have a checkoff, right? And they do their checkoff. And then the Beef Council is what? And they do their checkoff.
Well, so a lot of those livestocks are actually through a national checkoff. So it's a whole different system because you've got Colorado Pork, which is the state checkoff, who works with national pork. You've got Colorado Beef, which is the beef checkoff for the state. They work through NCBA. But like CLA is a membership organization, much like CCA, Colorado Cattlemen's, is a membership organization. So
I'm always asking the wrong person for money for the beef battalion then.
They both need to be giving you money. That's
I want
the
to talk to
key.
somebody who has the bucks.
You need
all need to be
livestock
getting money.
and beef.
Yep, CLA,
And cattle.
CCA, beef checkoff. Heck, even ask RCAF.
And
They
US
may be-
cattlemen too. Ask them all. They will all
Yeah.
give you money.
Kansas has participated. They've given us checks for that. Nebraska's given beef battalion checks.
The cattle women have
National's
given
been
checks
involved.
too.
Huh?
The cattle women
Yeah.
at a state and national level.
And I just got to tell you a story about this because you all know how I'm passionate about that part. But we had a meeting at one point, a feed down in Denver. It's supposed to be a small one. Everybody's supposed to meet me at a fire. I had like 7 people. They're supposed to meet me at Fire Station 3. So we could go down there, serve this 100 soldiers, and come back home. And that morning, every single person called me and backed out for one reason or another. I'm sitting here, how the hell am I gonna? I had nobody to help. It was just there could be 3 cooks myself. I said, it's just not enough. Well, luckily that morning there was a group of people meeting in our community over the fire station, and it happened to be the Christian Motorcycle Association, which I didn't know who it was. I seen all the motorcycles out there. Went over there and told them my predicament. I said I could use some help. Yeah, we'll do it. I said, okay, how many? All of us. Well, there was 50 in that meeting. They all went down there. To make a long story short, how great this thing worked is that now the Christian Motorcycle Association loved what we were doing. So it took them a full year to change their bylaws, but they increased their membership across the United States by $1 per member. And they now donate that to the All-American Beef Battalion. And if we're ever short anywhere in the United States, we can call it the Christian Motorcycle Association for volunteers. That's always available to us. So something that was going to be a disaster turned into a real blessing.
Well, and Mike, I think that you just also highlighted something that we could do. Like we say, how does CCA serve producers? We could say, how does CCAC serve our communities? Through that, like we could say one of our communication focuses, like we'll have a month of giving, and we're going to go and ask all of our corn producers to give $1 that then we donate to the beef battalion. And then
Gosh, if we do that, we would have to budget this thing. It would be so much more money.
I mean, that would be so easy. And how many people, like today, I donated like $75 to beef sticks for backpacks because somebody on social media had said, hey, this is what I'm doing. And so I'm challenging, so many of my friends to donate dollars for this.
That's cruel. You ever taste one of those?
No, the beef sticks they're actually pretty good, and they give them to kids for the weekend because we've got like 1 in 6 kids in Colorado's food insecure, and so they're sending these beef sticks home for kids in backpacks for the weekends. And I just thought that was so cool and how simple. Like if I posted that and 20 of my friends donated, like if we could come back and say that the corn industry in Colorado made this kind of a contribution for these social issues that we care about, I think that matters and builds really good trust and goodwill with our supply chain, with our consumers, everybody. So I wonder. Here's
a stat that would really stick out is that, 6% of the the population in America is from rural America. 85% of the military comes from that 6%.
Isn't that amazing? Then that's another beautiful thing that we should be communicating a lot, right? Yeah. We should be prideful in that and saying that, isn't that amazing?
And that's why agriculture people have never complained about giving us money to the beef battalion, because they know it's the rural kids that are keeping us there.
Absolutely. So I wonder, how do we give back that way?
I don't know, but you ought to take down that red flag behind you.
I know. Do you want to see, Nick, would Mike be offended by the t-shirt I sent you a picture of?
I think that one's great. Even Mike would appreciate that.
Okay, I'm going to the game Friday night.
I have to show you what my husband purchased today. This just arrived. Can you see what it says?
Bad corn. Oh man.
I'm actually contemplating ordering that for Kelly. Kelly Brunkhorst is the exec out of Nebraska. So I'm actually halfway considering just shipping it to him and seeing if he'll wear it.
The new board member that just got appointed. I'd have her wear that to the board meeting the first time, because that'd get Edgington and all the Iowa folks.
Well, and I think even stuff that's like that is fun and helps to build culture within our leaders and our community, and just having some sense of humor. So
that T-shirt that they put out, the classic here 2 years ago, they missed it in San Antonio. It's really good. It says "Corn in the USA." And I said, something? If you'd have put a couple of notes, remember this "Born in the USA," that would have stuck in their mind forever.
Totally.
I said, those notes brings it back. Corn in the USA.
I think that's clever.
I'm going to share this real quick with you, Mike. You can kind of see. I just drew it up real quick, and I screwed up the line here. But basically, you have a district here. Here, we'll do this.
Why even put Park County? I'd just go straight across from Summit to Jefferson, straight across.
It's following the watersheds.
Oh, okay.
So this is the Colorado. This is the Platte.
It's immaterial. There's no corn there.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is there's no corn here, and it's actually weird because if you actually dive into the other market orders, like wheat, not every county is included in the wheat market order.
Yeah.
Ours is the state. But you'd have like your 1, 2, and 3.
So Douglas County's in the northeast, isn't it?
Douglas County would be, yes, it'd be up here. And then I was just kind of looking at the where the lion's share of the corn is grown, and yeah, it's going to be grown in this one right here. But you
Yep.
still have your fair amount of producers down here in Baca and Prowers and in Kit Carson County. You actually have a fair amount grown right over here in this Pueblo County, Crowley, and Otero.
I can't see your pointer is not showing up on here, so I'm not sure where you're pointing, but
Pueblo.
Sorry. Pueblo, Crowley, and
okay.
Otero.
Yeah.
Yeah, those have some corn in them as well. You know, it's when you get up in this like Huerfano, you know, the San Luis Valley, that's where you're not really seeing anything. But also you don't grow a whole lot of corn in Gilpin or Clear Creek or Park or Jefferson or Douglas either. So
Yeah.
I really like
that was
that.
that was kind of my thoughts. But you have to divide Kit Carson and Yuma. You cannot have those in the same.
Right. That'd be too powerful.
Yeah.
I think that's really nice.
It just makes sense. It kind of divides it out into the natural watersheds, which is where you see a lot of the divide anyways. And as far as weld is at about 18 million bushels as of 2017 versus Yuma at 41.
So Weld and Yuma are the 1 and 2.
Oh no, number 2 is Kit Carson. I missed that, sorry.
So then that would actually be better because then we have some split too, because we had the 2 seats for the 2 highest growing. Okay. I like it. I like it.
And as long as you have a representative from one region or one representative from each region, doesn't matter where the rest of them are from, as long as they participate.
Right.
Yeah, that's the key.
And they will, because they're going to have authority. They're going to have meaning. They're going to have a really good focus on what they need to do. They've got you, Nick, keeping them going. Good culture, awesome staff, Willity, keeping them in line. Willity, what are you thinking? What would you add?
To this whole thing?
Yeah, anything that you're seeing from your vantage point?
No, I think it's good. I think all of this is good. And I'm absorbing a lot. Just, you know, it's good to hear Mike's and Nick's opinions about things because they've been around that for a long time. So I feel like, you know, the last 3/4 of this, I've just been learning. So it's good.
Just out of curiosity, which one of these pots would you throw transportation into?
Are you asking Willity or me or Nick?
Any of you?
I'd put it in sustainability.
I just happen to be looking behind me there. All those pictures on above the thing, those are ports along the Mississippi there.
Yep. And in that document with the priorities, with the 4 priorities and kind of the bullet points, transportation is aligned with sustainability in that one. But if you see a better alignment, then let's talk about it.
Because that's an issue. That's a state and national issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it could issue sustainability, but it also has a really direct correlation to market development if you think about trade. If you don't have the transportation network to get your
Exactly right.
product from point A to point B. I mean, look what happened to the market this week with corn and soybeans when the ports shut down because of Hurricane Ida. You know, we lost, what is it, 30 cents, Mike?
Yeah.
And, you know, as soon as the ports open back up, we'll probably regain that. But yeah, that is what really sets us apart in the global stage of things is very few protests disrupt shipments. We have the logistics to get it from Timbuktu to a port almost instantaneously compared to anywhere else. And that has a premium. That's why our grain is the most expensive grain in the world, but people will buy it because they know they'll get it.
Did you hear what that hurricane did in the Mississippi River? It changed the direction. It actually made the Mississippi River flow the opposite direction, they said.
Yep.
It's hard to even comprehend that.
the storm surge.
Yeah, I mean, the storm surge and the winds was so powerful, they said it changed the direction of the water. It pushed it back up the Mississippi.
That's actually the most dangerous part of the hurricane.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we could even put transportation in each one of them. Like if we wanted to make it like hyper
But I think it's one of the most important things in the country, period. Because, as I said, every place I went with the Greens Council in Latin America, but every one of them, that was one of their topics they want to talk about was American transportation, our river system, our locks and dams. How long are we going to be efficient before Brazil catches up with us and becomes efficient when China's dumping all that money? I don't think Brazil will ever catch us just because they don't have a river system, and nobody can match a river system for transportation. That's why it's so important we keep ours top notch.
You know, it all fits in. It fits in all three of those: sustainability, supply chain, and market development in a different
trusted
way.
supply chain, you're exactly right.
It sure does.
If we can't get our stuff to the people who need it, then we lose out on the market. If we can't get it to whether it's using it for ethanol or feed or whatever, if you can't get it from this country to another, you lose out on that trade market. And if you can't do it sustainably,
Once you lose a trade market, it's tough to get it back.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a new picture that kind of shows some of that. Like even just talking through this today was so helpful. And I've got some new visuals in mind in how we help to tell this story through how like the structure could look, how the mission aligns, how some of those priorities go. So I really value the feedback that we got, even though we had a small group. Mike and Nick and Willie, thank you. This has been helpful for me. I'm curious, was this helpful for you? What are you kind of thinking as we move forward and we wrap up tonight?
So I kind of look at it, and with the 20th anniversary of 9/11 coming up, it just reminds me, the problem we had was all the government agencies are siloed. They never talked to each other. They just kept everything in their little silo and went and did their thing. How do we make sure that our priorities, our goals, everything we're talking about on that previous slide that you had up doesn't get siloed? And that we have that moving across each other.
Right. So kind of going back to how our committee and action team structure will align with these priorities, think that communication is the thing that also shows up in every single one of those. Right. And so in this first kind of bucket in our culture and issues management, reputation management, that communication structure has to be built. Right. And so
the part we left out is our communication with our congressman, the Goose Crow, to get. It's very, very important we do that, because look at Busto just brought that bill forward for the Next Generation Fuels Act, and I keep writing Crow's deal. I mean the Goose. I keep the same form letter, but I wish somebody could figure out a way to get to him to make sure. I don't want the form letter. I just want to make sure that he knows that this is. If you think that Green Deal is so damn good, I'm sure you vote favorably on this Next Generation Fuels Act.
Right.
But I don't know if he knows anything about it, because you can't get a hold of him. Maybe you guys have a way to do that.
And we have to be careful in what's the policy versus education. And so we put that community leaders, the kind of
this is an education part for him.
Right, as that community leaders would include the politicians, but we didn't call them out specifically as politicians, knowing that kind of education and communication would absolutely.
But that is something, Nick, the council needs to educate our congressmen, educate them on the advantages of this Next Generation Fuel Act.
Right.
And how it'll fit in with educate them how it's going to fit in with their clean air and low carbon, high octane, new engines, all that kind of good stuff. But we need to find a way to get them to answer us and not a form letter. I mean, as Michael Fever, they don't give a rat's ass who I am, because I get the same form letter every time. And last time I wrote to him, out of 5 letters, I said, you don't need to answer me back because I got the same form letter. What do I get? The same damn form letter again.
Right.
So it's very frustrating.
It is.
So maybe Colorado Corn Council will have more pull instead of a Michael Fever. Maybe if he sees that, he'll know that they're talking for a lot of people. Maybe he'll listen to that instead of get a form letter. I don't know.
I think there's some opportunities to partner with NCGA on that, where we can make the introduction, we can present the information and the education piece of it, and then hand it off to you and the others who are.
Do it quickly. I'm supposed to be talking to these people next on the 13th, the week of the 13th. We're meeting in DC there for that reason.
Good. That next point of the siloing, in this first year, we have to build what our process is. And so is it a monthly meet? I don't, like, there's a lot of ways we can get to that, but the communication plan will be stronger. And maybe it requires more staff. Maybe it requires more technology. Like, Mike, here, I have a thought. We went through all of the communication channels that we use to communicate with producers. And we started to wonder, or I wondered, I don't know if anybody else liked the idea. I'm like, would a producer read a text message that said, you know, hey, we're going to have an event or something, more so than an email or a printed material? Have we ever?
A text message reminds you better. I mean, if you would text me a half hour before this thing, oh yeah, but I just hadn't have it there right in front of me. So I'll know that my supper was ready at 5:45. Okay.